Hello, True Health Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. You're going to love today's interview. This woman, Palmer Kippola, had MS, multiple sclerosis, for 26 years, and she figured out how to no longer have MS, how to completely reverse and heal her MS. And in today's interview, she shares her story. One of the key factors that helped her to reverse her autoimmune disease was decreasing and managing stress. And we talk a bit about the physiological reasons why we need to, on a daily basis, have a routine that decreases our stress levels. It decreases the cortisol that puts us in the parasympathetic nervous system response of rest and digest. It's very important, and we don't do it enough, especially if we have an autoimmune condition. So I want to share with you something I really recommend. If you're the type of person who is battling a chronic illness and you want to heal, you're going to love this suggestion. I've talked before in past episodes about how much I love sunlight and saunas. I have one myself. It's really aided me in my healing journey. And I know that dozens of listeners have also purchased the sunlight and sauna and shared with me their personal story of how it's been a great tool for them. Well, this summer, Sunlight and Sauna is giving my listeners a free chromotherapy device installed into their sauna, and it aids with relaxation. So being in a sauna, number one, is very relaxing. It does turn on the healing response. It turns off the stress response in the body. It's incredibly healing, and it decreases the stress hormone. In addition to just being in a sauna and all the benefits that it'll provide, this is a low heat sauna. They do have options for high heat, but for those who are in chronic stress or having chronic autoimmune condition, you may not be comfortable with going to a sauna because you're thinking it's just going to be very hot. Well, I start sweating in my sunlight at about 119 degrees, and the air is very comfortable. It's almost like just slightly above room temperature. I feel really good. All my muscles totally relax, and my body is expelling toxins through my sweat. And I stay in there about between a half an hour and 40 minutes, so it's very relaxing. When you have the chromotherapy in there, it adds both light and sound to decrease the stress, and they are able to prove that it sends your brain into these relaxing waves. It takes you down out of that stress response, and they're showing that it is really helpful for those with post-traumatic stress and with high chronic anxiety, and those in chronic stress states, which often people with autoimmune are. So I highly recommend checking out Sunlight, and you can just give them a call, like Google Sunlight and Saunas, give them a call, tell them I sent you, Ashley James from Learn True Health Podcast, because you get free shipping and you get this free chromotherapy added to your sauna, and that's worth several $100s there. They do have a type of sauna it's called the Solo system, and it is portable. You can lay in it. It's ultra low EMF and non-toxic. And then when you're done, you wipe it down and you put it in your closet. So they do have that option for those who don't want to have a big wooden sauna in their house or condo, which I have, and I love it. It only takes up a corner of the bedroom, and it's wonderful. So I definitely recommend Sunlight and Sauna. It has been a great tool for me in my healing journey, and so many listeners have shared with me that they're having wonderful results with it. So as you listen to today's episode and you start to understand why stress is a very important thing to learn how to manage on a daily basis, know that Sunlight and Sauna has a wonderful solution for you. And as a Learn True Health listener, you definitely get a great discount by going with them. And if you're interested in learning more about Sunlight and why I chose their company over the dozens and dozens of other sauna companies out there, please go to learntruehealth.com and type in sauna or type in Sunlighten and in the search box, and listen to my interviews. I did 2 interviews on the Sunlight and Sauna with the founder and with one of the employees there who I absolutely adore. Both of them share wonderful stories and explain why Sunlighten, for me, is the better option. I took about 2 years in researching all these different companies and contacting all these different companies and talking to naturopaths and talking to other doctors until I finally decided that Sunlighten was my sauna company, and I'm really glad I did. I've had only amazing experiences with their saunas and with their company and their customer service, so I highly recommend them as a healing tool to help you both detoxify, sweat out those toxins, and bring down the stress, decrease that stress. And also being a Sunlight and Sauna helps decrease inflammation as well. All wonderful healing tools that we need to help us on our healing journey. My goal for you is that if you have autoimmune disease, that you learn today how to beat it by listening to today's interview and following all the wonderful advice that Palmer gives today. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being a listener to Learn True Health podcast. Please continue sharing these episodes with all your friends and family so we can help everyone that we love to learn true health. Enjoy today's interview. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 367. Today we are in for a big treat. We have with us Palmer Kippola, who is a functional medicine certified health coach. What has impressed me so much is that she overcame her 26-year battle with multiple sclerosis, and she went on to design a formula to help everyone with autoimmune condition to no longer have it. And she explains, she's going to teach us today, she's going to explain why we can permanently and forever reverse autoimmune disease. If you go to a traditional MD, they're going to say that you need to be on drugs and manage it. And that maybe they'll even say that your autoimmune disease can go into remission, but at any time it could sneak up on you and come back and flare up. And so they want to get you on drugs for the rest of your life. Not Palmer's experience. Her experience is that you can epigenetically shift your body so that you no longer have autoimmune, and you're 100% forever in remission. I'm so excited for my listeners to learn from you today, Palmer. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's an absolute honor to be with you, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, this is going to be really exciting. Right off the bat, I want to say congratulations. Your book is number one Amazon bestseller in 8 categories. You launched it a few months ago, and it is just selling like hotcakes. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, your book is called Beat Autoimmune, the 6 Keys to Reverse Your Condition and Reclaim Your Health, and it has a foreword with Mark Hyman. I've had him on the show and I absolutely love him. What does it feel like to have an Amazon best-selling book?
Well, it's a little surreal, I have to tell you. It just has exceeded my expectation. But what it says to me is that people are seeking real solutions. And that is so exciting to me, that people actually know it's possible or believe that it's possible to completely heal, and they are looking for those answers.
Now, it's number one in 8 categories, including immunology, alternative medicine, lupus, MS, chronic pain. So you cover a lot of really great content in your book. And of course, you're here today to teach us some of that content. Before we get into that, though, I really want to hear your story. Can you take us back? What happened in your life that led up to you having MS for 26 years and ultimately discovering how to no longer have an autoimmune condition?
Yeah, this is a story that starts when I'm 19 years old, so I need to take you back just a few years. I was a happy, healthy, well-adjusted 19-year-old young woman. I was home for the summer after my freshman year of college. I was just working a summer job, doing my thing. And one morning I woke up and the soles of my feet were just tingling, that feeling that you get when you have sat on a limb too long and when the blood flows back, it's all tingly. So I thought, you just shake your legs and the blood's going to flow back. Only this particular morning, the blood didn't flow back even when I was jumping up and down. And I thought, this is just going to go away. So off I went to work. but the tingling just crept up my legs like a vine. And by the time the tingling reached my knees, I knew something was really wrong. So I called my parents and they called the family doctor who said, get her over to the neurologist at UCLA. So I don't know how we managed it, but we got in that afternoon. And by the time we sat in the neurologist's office, the tingling was all the way up to my tummy. And the neurologist had me do this very cursory exam, heel toe across her room. She tested my reflexes, the knees, touch your fingers to your nose with your eyes closed. And I think it was a 5 or 6 minute visit. And she then pronounced, I'm 99% certain that you have MS, multiple sclerosis. And if I'm right, there's nothing you can do except go home and wait it out. So we had never heard of MS. This was before the internet. There was no Dr. Terry Walls. We just left her office with very little information, very little hope, and went home. And by the time we got home that evening, the tingling was all the way up to my collarbone. And by the time we got into bed, my mom crawled in with me and she was holding me and crying. And I was crying because by that time I couldn't feel her holding me. Ashley, my whole entire body had gone completely numb and would stay numb from the neck down for a full 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh, that must have been so scary.
It was absolutely terrifying. And I mean, we just didn't know what to expect. There was nothing, we couldn't just go and check out Dr. Google. Really, I was relegated to the couch for those 6 weeks. We didn't know how long it was going to last. I'm just so grateful that I was at home at the time with my parents, and they were tremendous supporters. My mom was quick to empathize and hug me and, start planning what we could for, we didn't know what, if my life permitted being in a wheelchair and going to school locally. And then my dad was also very quick to motivate me in my can-do spirit. He would often say, honey, you can beat this thing. You just so you understand him, he was a former fighter pilot. So he had he had a very strong can-do spirit, and he always fired mine up. So I had the empathy, I had the motivation, and a lot of time to just contemplate and be on the couch. And I will say that during those 6 weeks, I am so grateful that friends came by and they weren't too scared off by this mysterious disease. And one friend came, a family friend who was into things metaphysical. And in retrospect, I can see that this was a gift, but at the time I was very offended. She asked me, Palmer, why do you think you got the MS? Bam. What? You think I caused this? What do you mean? Why do I think I got this? I was offended, but I didn't have much to do or very far to go. So I was like a dog with a bone with that question. And I just lay on the couch thinking about this. Why do I think I got maybe did I bring this on? And I want to share with you what I came up with as my initial hypothesis for why, but I need to take you a little bit farther back in time because I had been adopted as a baby. I was 3 days old. And my parents, very loving parents, but my dad, who I mentioned was also a fighter pilot, had very strong opinions about things and very definitive views on how things should be. And he didn't like that my mom was overweight, and she really struggled with that. So he would yell quite a bit. And my earliest memory about age 3 or age 4 is my dad is yelling at my mom, who has shut her bedroom door, is probably crying behind her door. And I'm standing up to my dad with my little dukes up saying, you yell at my mom and I'll call her names and I'll sock your lights out, or whatever, words to that effect. So in lying on the couch there at age 19, completely numb, it occurred to me in a flash of insight that the reason for the MS was chronic stress. I had become a child warrior. The hyper vigilant, always scanning the environment for safety or danger, and like catching knives out of the air vigilance, right? So that is what occurred to me. And I didn't know anything about the immune system. I had no basis for any kind of knowledge about this, but I envisioned my immune system as having become hypervigilant too, that if there wasn't a real battle going on, like a virus or some sort of bacterial threat, that it would create friendly fire. It would turn against my own body. So much of this still rings true for me today, that chronic stress was at the root of the MS, even though I know there's a lot more to the story.
I love it that you had that as you're lying on the couch. You have this insight into that, how the stress was affecting your immune system and how your immune system was responding. So, while you're lying on the couch, did you start to do things to try to calm down or calm down your immune system, or what did you do with that information once you had it?
Yes, yes, I did. Well, the first thing we did, another family friend brought a book, Norman Cousins' Anatomy of an Illness. And in it, Dr. Cousins recounts his own experience healing from some mysterious autoimmune condition with high doses of laughter and vitamin C. So I didn't know anything about nutrition, but the laughter made perfect sense. So every night, my family and I made it our mission to watch funny things on TV. And that was definitely a good distraction at the very least. It gave me, an oasis of calm from the fear. So that was one thing. And I did start doing visualizations, if you will. If you think about Pac-Man, it was that rudimentary where I was envisioning my immune system was like, shooting laser beams at these little critters that were in my body that shouldn't be there. So guided imagery and laughter were two of the first things that I used. But it took a couple of years for me to really put this into a practice, if you will. So I am very fortunate that at the end of 6 weeks, the numbness retreated enough for me to go back to college. So I went back for my sophomore year, and I knew that I intuited, since chronic stress was at the root of the MS, then I needed to learn how to relax. And so that drove me for the next 26 years, that I needed to put relaxation practices in place to calm that hypervigilance. And the first thing I started doing was yoga. And I noticed that when I did the practice and did the deep breathing and actually did the poses, I noticed a reduction in symptoms. And conversely, when I was really stressed, like there were exams at school or conflict at home or later in the workforce when I might have been overwhelmed with work-related stuff, I noticed more flare-ups of the MS. So that was really, really easy for me to see cause and effect of stress equals symptoms, relaxation equals no symptoms, or none at all, but a reduction in symptoms, I should say. And the next thing I started doing in the early 90s was to meditate. And I noticed once again, if I did it, things would calm down. And if I didn't, I would experience more symptoms. But still, the MS persisted. It didn't go away just because I started to relax more. It was always there to some varying degree.
How many flare-ups would you have? It would just be like little symptoms, like if you were under stress, you'd wake up and have tingling, numbness, or pain. Or would you have major flare-ups where you would be in a wheelchair?
Fortunately, I never made it into a wheelchair. I don't how to say that. I never ended up in a wheelchair. I did have an experience once, probably the most dreadful was, aside from that 6 weeks of total body numbness, was a flare up of optic neuritis. So, and this is a striking before and after. So I was working for AT&T Network Systems in New Jersey, a stressful marketing job. And I went on vacation to a really relaxing Caribbean island, fantastic time. And I came back, and the moment I set foot in the corporate building under those fluorescent lights, I was struck blind in one eye and had this searing pain that would last about 2 weeks.
Mm.
And that would take 2 visits to an emergency room for the pain and them not figuring out what it was. And then finally a trip down to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, where there's an MS specialty, to be diagnosed with optic neuritis, which is in fact a hallmark symptom of MS. But for the most part, your question about, feeling symptoms, there was tightness like rubber bands around my torso. There was numbness and tingling, and it wasn't, there was no rhyme or reason to where the symptom would show up. And there was also this general profound fatigue that I felt.
And the catch-22 is when you have these symptoms, it causes more stress. It's just it's this feedback loop, because you don't know if it's going to get worse. You don't know when it's going to get better. You're feeling it in your body, so it's real. And so you're constantly worrying about it, which is creating more stress, which is creating more symptoms, and the symptoms are creating more stress and worry, which is creating more symptoms, and on and on. And how do you take a breath and do a break state?
Oh, that is a great question. I think it's so important to understand that the stress itself creates such a downward spiral. It's a vicious cycle of stress and symptoms and stress and more stress, and then insomnia, and you can't sleep and you're stressed about that. So I think inherent in that question too, I think you mentioned taking a deep breath. Anything that you can do to cut that cycle, and you've practiced, I understand that you do NLP. One thing that I have found super, super helpful is just to do the deep breathing, taking maybe a total of 6 rounds of 5 breaths in really slowly. Deep belly breathing is some way to just get back centered in the body and not to let your mind spiral out of control, because there's no sense creating more stress. There's what is, and then there's the story that you start telling about what is.
Mm-hmm.
So just to stay present with what is and breathe into it and get centered and back in the body, and whatever you can do to center yourself has been, in my experience, the most helpful.
You say that, it reminds me of landmark. Did you do any landmark, or did you learn that somewhere else?
I don't know if I learned it from Landmark, but you caught me. Yes, I've done Landmark through their advanced program, and I guess SELP, which was very helpful. I can't remember what that stands for, but maybe you do.
Self-expression and leadership program.
There you go. There
Yeah,
you go.
yeah, I did landmark when I was a teenager, and then after my mom died, I ended up taking a lot of their advanced courses, and then they hired me, and I was on staff in Toronto, at the Toronto Center. So I love landmark, but they got a little miffy when I told them I wanted to study NLP, because they just wanted everyone to do landmark and not look at where landmark got their original stuff from. So that's they copied NLP, and so I went basically to the source. But what, coming back to what you said about story, this is really important. I was just talking a friend off the wall who was very stressed out about something, and she was exacerbating her symptoms so much so that she was unable to like walk. She was really exacerbating her stress, and it's hard to tell someone you're causing this. I mean,
Right.
she has health issues, but stress exacerbates the health issues. And the only time she has flare-ups is when she's in stress. And so it's hard to say, by the way, you have control over this, because people feel like, are you telling me that I'm doing this to myself and it's all in my head? And it's not. I'm not saying that at all. It is very real. And that emotional, mental, and physical stress, both from internal, emotional and mental, and external stressors, right? Like the what we eat and our environment are, so if you're in an area where there's high pollution in the air and you have asthma, that's an external stressor on your body. But if you are not sleeping at night and then you're worrying a lot, that's the exact same as breathing in pollution for someone who has asthma. It's just a different kind of stress, but it's going to do the same thing to the body. It takes the body out of the healing mode and into the fight or flight mode. And when we do that, if we're in fight or flight, we're not healing. We're either healing or we're fighting to survive in the moment. And so, like you said, taking those deep breaths is going to give us that break state where we can bring our body back into healing mode and calm it down. But when we're worried about something, we're throwing fuel on the fire. And I love that you brought up the idea of the story, because that's exactly what I had to tell my friend, which really helped her. She was having symptoms in her body. Now she has some stressors, emotional stressors going on in her life with her family. And then her symptoms came up. And then she started worrying about the symptoms. Oh my gosh, does this mean I'm going to have to go to the ER? Does this mean I'm going to what's going to happen to me? Am I going to be able to walk? Do I need to go get my walker? And, I don't have anyone to take care of me. And so she starts making a story about the feeling. All she had was a sensation in her body, but her mind wanted to predict the future so that she could be prepared. But the mind always goes to worst case scenario, the doomsday. And so her mind started thinking about all the worst things that could possibly happen because she's feeling this sensation in her body. And then that exacerbated her worry and her stress, which then created more symptoms. And that was a feedback loop. So then she started feeling more symptoms, and she started worrying about them more and thinking, this means that I'm going to be this or that I'm going to be that. And so I had to say, let's focus on what's so right now, because all the this means that the brain does, all the story that the brain creates, is not necessarily true. It's just trying to predict the future based on the past. But we're not living our past right now, and we need to do a break state. So catch yourself when you're in story. Story meaning when you're trying to predict this negative future based on what you're currently feeling in your body. So you felt the searing pain in your head and you couldn't see out of one eye. Your brain probably went, oh my God, I'm going to be blind for the rest of my life. And that's the story that you probably created, because I would. I would absolutely in that moment. And then that feeds into creating more and more stress. So we have to come back to, just like you said, we have to come back to what's so in the moment is I'm having these feelings, and that's it. That's the only thing that's so. What can I do right now to help me to trigger the healing mode and to de-escalate the stress mode? So
Absolutely.
I love that. So, okay, so you do the deep breathing, which immediately helps. And then to manage stress on a daily basis, you're doing yoga and meditation. Obviously you've discovered more things to help, because this was just helping to manage it, but it didn't help it to completely go away. So after this, after you discovered that the optical nerve,
Optic neuritis.
yeah, the optic neuritis was a common symptom of MS, then what happened?
So I just kept on this path of stress reduction because I thought that that was going to be my path to freedom. And in fact, it was a big part of it. But in addition to that, I did a bunch of other experiments over the 26 years. And I intuited that food had to do with something with the MS. I didn't know what. And at the time, there was very little information available. And I came across the Swank Diet book that purported that a low-fat vegetarian diet was, in fact, the best for MS. So that was the next experiment I did. And for me, it didn't work. I didn't notice a reduction in symptoms. And in fact, when I added more healthy whole grains into my diet, I noticed that I started having more tummy trouble and no reduction in MS symptoms. So every time I ate, I would notice some gurgling, not like IBS symptoms that were debilitating, but just this kind of gurgling sensation that you can just feel something going on that doesn't feel great, but I thought it was normal. I thought everybody felt this way after eating. So I didn't think anything of it. And I just kept eating the whole grains at every meal. I grew up eating great big bowls of cereal, and I had my peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on whole wheat bread. And for dinner, there was either a pasta or, sometimes pizza or beer. And every time I ate, I felt that grumbling. So that was my first experiment with food. And I must say that all different types of vegetarianism for me didn't seem to make anything better. In fact, I discovered that I had more tummy issues as a result of adding more grains to my diet.
Mm-hmm. Right. So not many people get that there's a connection between gut health and other systems of the body. So did you feel that disrupting your gut health with grains played a role in affecting your inflammation, affecting, the MS, the autoimmune. Did you make that correlation?
I didn't make any correlation whatsoever. I thought this was normal, and it just seemed like a failed experiment to me at the time. So it wasn't until 2010 when I actually discovered my linchpin trigger, which I will talk more about. But I just wanted to add one more failed experiment to this equation before um, telling you what my eureka experiment was. And the third experiment I tried was medication, which for me was not beneficial. I, in fact, developed more, people know of them as side effects. They're actually not side effects, they're very direct effects that medication causes. But I think the drug companies want us to believe that these are just little tiny side effects. I actually had developed heart attack symptoms about 15 minutes after injecting myself one night with this medication purported to help the MS. And that was a terrifying experience. And they just, assured me that this is a normal, known side effect of the medication. And I developed a wound that wouldn't heal for 6 months. And I developed lipoatrophy, which is a disappearance of fat where you inject yourself in all the fatty places. They don't talk about that. But if the medication worked, you sort of overlook those, or it's a question of balance. Like, is it doing more good than harm? For me, it ended up doing more harm than good. So I was already managing well with the stress reduction, and I was muddling along with the diets, trying to figure it out on my own, again, not having the internet. And it wasn't until 2010 that I decided finally I need to go see a nutritionist. And I found a functional medicine nutritionist who lived pretty close to me. And she ran a bunch of tests, and it turned out that I had non-celiac gluten sensitivity. In other words, I didn't have celiac disease, but I was very sensitive to gluten, one of the proteins in grains, notably wheat. And so this functional medicine nutritionist educated me on what gluten was doing to my body, how that was what was causing these gut symptoms. Remember, I shared that I was eating gluten at every meal for as long as I could chew food. And I had no idea what it was doing to my body. So she educated me on how it was inflaming the lining of my gut, creating a leaky gut. And she led me through a gut healing protocol that included a 30-day elimination diet. And so that's what I did in October of 2010. I remember the date because this is really notable for me. Within a week of removing gluten, I stopped having tummy trouble after eating. And within 1 month of removing the gluten, I stopped having any and all MS symptoms ever again.
Yes.
Like, end of story. But
Yeah.
I'm really quick to footnote, Ashley, that this does, your experience might be different. Everybody has a different reaction. I'm not suggesting that reversing MS is as simple as removing gluten and you're done, because our root causes are different. And we'll go into the fights categories that I came up with to look at all the things that need to be looked at. But gluten happens to be the number one biggest baddie when it comes to food and autoimmune conditions. So I just wanted to get that said. And I would also like to add that I was so excited about this fact that by January of 2011, I thought, I've got to go tell my neurologist, because over 26 years, I had seen 6 neurologists. Okay, it's a 26-year period, right? I've lived in different places, 6 neurologists who all had done MRIs and office visits and everything, who had said, yes, this is MS. And this one that I was seeing in Palo Alto, I told him, this is what I did. I removed the gluten and I don't have MS anymore. I can't feel it. And prior to that, I felt like I was plugged into an electric socket 24/7. Like, I could feel this humming in the background all the time. I knew it was always there. So when I went into his office, really excited, and he gave me one of these pat me on the head condescending remarks and said, Palmer, gluten sensitivity is a fad, and your MS must have been benign after all.
Right.
Right, right. There
Right.
was no acknowledgement of anything that was done, and that just fast forward now to last year when I went back to the same neurologist to close this story. To 8 years later, I thought it would be a good time to go back and get a follow-up MRI with him and just to check in. And he wondered what I was doing back. And I said I was actually really curious what his thinking was on MS and autoimmune conditions. And the first thing he said to me was, Palmer, we now know that gluten sensitivity is real. And I bet more than a third of my MS patients are sensitive to gluten.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a recognition and acknowledgement that about 10 years later, he had come to an understanding, maybe had finally read the science for himself. And then he had me do the follow-up MRI, and I came back and sat side by side with him, and we looked at the results, the before and the after. And he showed me the pattern of MS and how there was a Dawson finger pattern that was very much consistent with what MS patients' lesions in their brain look like, and how my brain showed that the lesions had disappeared or were fading. And he just looked at me and said, this couldn't be a better story. And Ashley, I tried to partner with him saying, yeah, I'm a functional medicine certified health coach. And he said, I can't give you my patient list, but maybe I can send people to you. And I said, wouldn't it be great just to have 2 or 3 clients that we work on together, like a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I pursued that a couple of times and I never heard back from him again. So
That is so frustrating. Why are they so threatened with getting people off of medication and 100% healed, especially when it comes to partnering with holistic health practitioners? Like, why? Why can't they drop the ego? And also, the ego, this is what drives me crazy. MDs, and this is part of their training. I know as individuals, I know there's probably MDs listening right now because they write to me. I'm not, again, not bashing individual
Mhm.
MDs. I'm saying that their training. It's like when you get a soldier to go into the military, they put them through Hell Week or whatever, Hell Month or whatever their training is, in order to mold them, in order to shape them. And if you look at how they've developed the training for MDs, it is to mold them into a certain kind of thinking. They do like 24-hour shifts, like these kind of things where it really does shift how you act and how you think. And their entire education, they spend 8-9 years being molded to believe that they have been taught everything, and that new information is really, really hard to come by because they've been taught everything. And they've been their gut their knee-jerk reaction when they hear something like, oh, I cut out a food and my diagnosis is going away or has gone away, is to scoff at it, and is to put it down, and is to, even without looking for information to prove or disprove, they just tell the patient that's incorrect. And that's their ego, that's their hubris. Instead of as a scientist, they would say, interesting hypothesis.
Mhm.
I do not know. See, most MDs can't say, I do not know. Let's go look into this together. I'm going to put my bias and my personal human ego and bias aside. And let's go look into this together and see if there's other studies, see if there's validity to your claims. No, most MDs do not do that. If you find a doctor that says, I don't know the answers, but let's find them together, that is a potential keeper. you know,
Absolutely. Yes.
and it just frustrates me that especially women. I've heard story upon story of women who have not been listened to by their doctor, and just it's like they're brushed off as, oh well, that's just hysteria, right? Or that's just your hormones, or that's normal, whatever your symptoms are, that's just normal, and they're not listened to. And there's so many cases of people coming to their doctor and they feel like something's wrong. I feel something's wrong, and it turns out years later, they developed cancer, and it's like they knew something was wrong, but because the doctor just writes it off and sends them home and said, and they're basing things on their ego and not as a scientist. Let's see if we can prove or disprove this hypothesis. So it's frustrating to me because people go to their doctor because we put them on a pedestal and we expect answers, and then if they don't know the answer, that's threatening to their ego, so then they just make up one instead of actually looking into the science. So that puts the patients down and disempowers them. And we want to empower people to advocate for themselves. And thank God there's the internet so that we can, and thank God there's podcasts like this and, interviews like this, so we can go and empower ourselves and seek information. But we have to remember, when we bring this information to our doctor, they're not putting their ego aside. We have to get, like, whatever they say, if they're not willing to go and look into the research, then don't give up. Go to the next doctor and the next doctor and find one that'll partner with you and be okay with you advocating for yourself. I love seeing naturopaths. Many naturopaths I've seen are excited when I bring research from the internet and say, what about this? What about that? Can we look at this? Can we look at that? And they're excited to not know all the answers and to learn with me, because they're better at reading the science than I am. So if I can bring them something to look at and to research and look at all the studies, then great. They're going to do that for me. I'm just pointing them in the direction that I want them to go to help me, because I'm advocating for myself and getting my doctor to look into what I want. I love that you noticed and you listened to your body those 26 years and you kept experimenting, and you obviously you never gave up because it's your quality of life, but you advocated for yourself. And just because your doctor said, oh, this is hooey, this isn't real, you didn't go, oh, I'll just go start eating Cheerios again because my doctor says that this is hooey. You still listen to yourself. And there are people I know who their doctors have talked them out of a healthier lifestyle because the doctor just, they didn't believe in it. And that is so sad that sometimes people put the opinions that their doctors give them as higher than their own ability to listen to their body.
You're so beautifully said, Ashley. I want to thank you for saying all of that, because I am with you. This is not us coming down on doctors, but it feels like when there's not a curiosity that's demonstrated, even in the face of evidence that's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into this now with epigenetics, and there's actually an autoimmune equation. We have the knowledge, but not being curious, it's a little bit baffling, but it really speaks to the need that we all have to become the CEOs or the captain of our own ship, so to speak, of our own health. We really must do that. And I know that that's daunting, because it seems like, well, the doctor's supposed to be the one who's educated, who knows all of this. And sadly, and my understanding is that in medical practice often falls about 17 years behind science. And that's just because the medical schools can't keep up with what's coming. So the textbooks are out of date. And they are really, really busy people. And of course, insurance is involved. So that further limits what they can actually talk with patients about and get paid for. So the bottom line is, we need this root cause revolution. We have the information today to show us that it's not just about putting these autoimmune conditions into remission. And I loved how you said it at the beginning, like it's lurking there in the background, waiting to pounce forward. It just is not that way with cancer either. Read, Kelly Turner's Radical Remission for the stories of people who have overcome cancer. There are things that people put into practice that actually matter greatly in terms of changing your health outcomes. So I just wanted to say thank you for really advocating on behalf of each of us becoming the CEO of our own health and well-being, and feeling the confidence to step up and say, that just doesn't seem right to me. because, food, Hippocrates said that food is medicine, how many, 2,500 years ago? And we know this to be true. Just because the doctor didn't have nutrition training doesn't mean that it's not true. So anyway, and I do want to say that Western medicine is fantastic for acute illnesses, for
Yeah.
broken bones and surgeries and these acute conditions. But these gray area mysterious diseases that don't have a clear beginning and end are really not that's not the purview of medical doctors. They didn't get trained in this stuff. It's so many systems are interconnected. And for the most part, doctors get trained in, their siloed approach. And it works, like I said, for those acute illnesses. And, that's when you want to see a doctor. If I have a heart attack, I want to go to a hospital. But if I have MS, maybe not the best place. They don't have the right toolkit.
They're not looking to heal the root cause. They're looking to manage symptoms. They're really good at managing symptoms.
That's right.
And it is up to us to heal the root cause because, as it keeps coming back to it, it's our lifestyle that is the cause of this. So, lifestyle being the nutrition, the food we eat and don't eat, the amount of stress we have, how we move our body, all of that, our environment, all of that triggers the genes to express or to express in a certain way. So let's jump back into your story so we can discover your what you did then. So after you leave your doctor 10 years ago, you left your doctor's office and you knew that cutting out grains, was it all grains or just gluten grains?
Well, I eventually cut out all grains. I started just with gluten, but I found that for me, I have kind of naturally high blood sugar. And so for me to manage the blood sugar, just not having grains at all or starchy carbs was a better way to go. So I'll just say for autoimmune, removing the gluten is paramount, but my lifestyle, it's better for me to avoid all grains.
Got it. Okay, so after you left the doctor's office and he had poo-pooed going gluten-free and you knew in your gut that something, you were onto something, then what? What did you go, where'd you go from there?
So I just had this cognitive dissonance, that feeling that you have when you know something in your bones, and yet I had been told for 26 years by these six neurologists there was nothing I could do. It just didn't compute, right? How in the world was it possible that a woman like me, I was in, sales and marketing for high-tech companies. I was not in the health industry. So, but I decided I needed to learn for myself what had actually happened. So I dove into the research. You probably know PubMed. It is probably the largest database of biomedical research, I think owned by the NIH. It's just endless. So I just started doing research and upon research and looking for studies on the cause of autoimmune conditions. And I found just an incredible amount of evidence that talked about things like low vitamin D is associated with autoimmune conditions, low DHEA, which is another hormone associated with autoimmune, high mercury associated with autoimmune. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there are so many things that we can control, these environmental factors that seem to be associated with developing autoimmune conditions. And it wasn't just MS. I thought, MS was going to be some different animal or some different beast, but it turns out that any of the 150 or more autoimmune conditions all have similar root causes.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started putting the puzzle pieces together and I started writing down these categories. And it turned out it spelled the word fights, which stands for food, infections, gut health, hormone balance, toxins, and stress. So I just was super excited that now we had information that I wanted to share with the world. I knew that people needed to know about this. It wasn't okay with me that a doctor didn't know more about this. And I felt like I really wanted to help people. So I finally decided that I needed to share this with the world in the form of a book and not just keep this to myself, because honestly, I felt like it should have been front page news and it wasn't.
So each time you came across a study like the high mercury, did you look into what you could do to detox mercury? Did you go through each one? Oh, vitamin D, I should get my vitamin D checked. Oh, vitamin C. Oh, this. Just so were you each time you came across one, did you address it in your health?
Yes, well, the first thing I did is I wrote it down, and I had what I called my little root cause reversal checklist. I just wrote everything down, and I saw that poor sleep, for example, only getting 6 hours a night was enough to turn on inflammatory genes, and getting restorative sleep, on the other hand, turned on the nourishing genes and dimmed down those inflammatory ones. I learned that dairy can be very inflammatory for people with autoimmune conditions. So I did. It was self-experimentation first, but writing them all down on this sheet of paper, so that I could see the full uh, array of different root causes, and there were many of them, which I ended up putting in categories. So yes,
I am fascinated. 6 hours or less of sleep epigenetically turns on the expression of inflammatory genes.
yes,
I mean, think about
yes.
all the people. And now, does that include disrupted sleep?
The study says even a few hours of lost sleep can lead to turning on inflammatory genes.
That's huge.
Yeah, it is huge. And I'd like to, if this is an okay place to talk about it, introduce the topic of the toxin bucket. I know you've talked with your audience about this before, but I think this is really an appropriate place to include it, because we each carry inside us this metaphor of a toxin bucket into which all of these lifestyle factors go. So those things that I was researching, the mercury, I had a mouthful of mercury fillings. I had an addiction to sugar growing up. I not only had my Cheerios, I put tablespoon upon tablespoon of sugar and added my non-fat milk to it. So I'm ladling in dairy. I've got the gluten. I've got the chronic stress from childhood. I've got a mouthful of mercury fillings. All of those things individually, your body deals with. We have a certain amount of resilience as a child or a teenager, as an example. And theoretically, our bucket can hold a certain amount of toxins, and the bottom of the bucket should have holes, metaphorically, where those toxins get excreted through our skin, our colon, our through our kidneys, etc. And we want to make sure that the detox organs are functioning perfectly and flowing, things are flowing. But it turns out that in my case, I was adding more things to my toxin bucket than I was excreting. And it just gets
Mm.
to the point where once things start spilling over, the whole system just goes tilt. And this is when the leaky gut develops. This is when we start to experience symptoms, because leaky gut is the gateway to autoimmune conditions. So I finally figured out, in doing all of this research, that all of those elements that I was studying, the poor sleep, minimal exercise or minimal movement, eating a sad diet, even infections like candida and chronic Lyme disease, all of those elements are adding to the toxin bucket. And it's our job, if we want to stay healthy or to get well, to examine those things that we're putting into the bucket, or that might be there, without our knowledge, but to do something about it. And so we can start emptying the toxin bucket. And I think that's a lifetime's work, because we want to practice daily detoxification and not just do a few quick cleanses a few times a year. But that was what I decided. My toxin bucket had overflowed, and that is how the MS developed. And so to heal from the MS and any autoimmune condition, we need to examine what our own buckets are filled with and see if we can remove those elements so that we can get back to balance.
Mm-hmm. So to go to your acronym, food, uh, can you, infections, gut health, what were the other?
Hormone balance, toxins, and stress. So those are the big categories.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So you started discovering as you went through your research that certain nutrient deficiencies were associated with autoimmune, and then toxins, the toxic overload like mercury was associated with autoimmune. Where do infections come into play?
Well, affections are a very insidious contributor to autoimmune conditions. They are there, often lurking in the background, like Epstein-Barr, for example, is a herpes virus. And it may be you had childhood mono, and it's not until you're hit with a major stressor, maybe later in life, maybe a loved one dies, maybe you lose a job, or something happens and knocks you off balance. And that hidden or latent infection gets reactivated, and that can become a major contributor. So it's usually some combination of factors, and with infections, it's both a cause and um, a hitchhiker, I'll call it, because sometimes it's the chronic Lyme disease that is a root cause of an autoimmune condition or Epstein-Barr. And sometimes when your immune system has taken a hit and it's dealing with an autoimmune condition, your defenses are down, and it's more likely that people with autoimmune conditions will pick up an infection because people with autoimmune conditions typically are hypometabolic, meaning their metabolisms are low and slow. There's usually low thyroid involved, and when we're in a hypometabolic state, we are our environment, our milieu is more attractive to infections, and that's another conundrum with infections and autoimmune conditions. They seem to go hand in hand.
Like, I'm thinking Lyme disease often has co-infections, and the people I've interviewed on the show about Lyme all say then these experts are people who have help people reverse Lyme disease, and they themselves have had Lyme and help people reverse it. And they say that it's the environment of the body that became optimal, because like an entire family could be exposed to ticks that have Lyme, but only one person in the family develops chronic Lyme disease, and everyone else just gets over it. It's
That's
not
right.
it's not like 100% of the time people develop Lyme. It's that the environment of the body was perfect, meaning their toxic bucket was full and their
Mm-hmm.
immune system was somehow compromised, and the body became this perfect host for the chronic Lyme disease and all its co-infections. And so what people keep saying, all these experts on the show keep saying, is that it's the environment of the body that invites these infections to live in us. And when I say infections, it can be parasites, it can be bacteria or viruses, or all of them, right?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so you're looking to help the body become an environment that's inhospitable to these infections.
Well said. Absolutely. It's all about the terrain. And so, what I have found is that we actually need a two-pronged strategy to address these infections. It's not just about kill, kill, kill the Lyme co-infections, as an example. It's not just a killing strategy because, like with chemotherapy, for example, if you have cancer and you get chemo, it might kill the cancer cells. But if you don't do anything to address the root cause of why you got cancer in the first place, the cancer often returns with a vengeance. So it's a similar kind of story here. So the two-pronged strategy that I talk about is, first, we've got to unburden our immune systems. When you're dealing with any kind of autoimmune condition, it's not, MS is not a brain problem. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is not a thyroid disease. Rheumatoid arthritis is not a problem with your joints. It actually may manifest that way, but these are all immune system problems. So when you help unburden your immune system, you're actually helping resolve the autoimmune condition, and you're doing the best you can to help clear infections. So we want to remove all sources of inflammation. And that would include those inflammatory foods that we talked about, the gluten, the dairy, the sugar. And for some people, they have challenges with things like eggs and soy and corn, some with nuts and so forth. You need to discover for you what your sources of inflammatory foods are, because that's the best place to start. When we remove these sources of inflammation, when it comes to infections, they love sugar. So infections like Candida, as an example, thrive on sugar. So when you take away their preferred fuel, the sugar, you're creating an environment that's inhospitable to those infections. So that's why that's a really, really good place to start, is addressing the sources of inflammation that you're putting into your system. And then the second piece, which is very much synergistic with the first, is to raise your metabolism. And the way we can do this is to help ourselves. I have found three things that work really well. One is to go low carb, because carbohydrates convert to sugar in our body, the high glycemic ones. So we want to do what we can to minimize the high glycemic foods and starches and processed foods. And I also find that intermittent fasting is an excellent strategy to remove those sources of even digesting is metabolically really high energy for the body. And when we can give ourselves a break, our digestion a break, we can actually focus our energies on healing, as an example. And finally, cold showers. At least the last 30 seconds or minute of a shower can be another great way to raise your metabolism. So those are all good strategies to help you become an inhospitable place for infections.
Love it. I love it. It's I love this approach because you're looking at correcting the terrain of the body and looking at it from all the different angles. Now, how long have you been teaching the fights method to help people to no longer have autoimmune condition?
Well, I have been coaching people for the last couple of years. I got my certification to be a functional medicine certified health coach. And, it's interesting, Ashley, because the first book that I set out to write was a book of healing stories. I wanted to not just share my own story of healing from MS. I wanted to make it an exponential good news story to share other people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an agent, and she tried to shop that around. And it's disappointing to me that I learned that, and the quotes were, healing stories don't sell. I
Oh,
couldn't believe it. I know. I find healing stories very powerful, and I share them on my website. But in fact, the publishers weren't interested in that. They wanted to know instead of having 12 doctors' perspectives on healing, they wanted my perspective. And that's when I thought, I actually need to package this up in a way that is digestible, pun intended, so that people could really get their arms around what they need to do. So that's when I really started coming out with more information on fights as a protocol, and not just, you know, throwing things against the wall to see what would stick. I actually now have a framework for healing.
so you have been working with people for the last few years and getting results. Can you share what kind of results? Can you share some of those stories of success?
Absolutely. So here's an example. One of my clients she's probably 50 years old now. She has a couple of kids. She's a single mom. She works, and she had IBS symptoms so bad that she couldn't leave the house. And she used to be an athlete. She used to run and participate in races. And when she developed these IBS symptoms, she was terrified, as you can imagine, to leave the house to go for a run and not knowing where there was going to be a toilet. And she also had a long commute to work, and that made it very, nearly debilitating for her. She also had celiac disease, and she had Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And I had given a talk at the end of 2016 for an organization called the Silicon Valley Health Institute, SVHI. And they recorded a 30-minute video of me sharing my MS healing journey and what I've learned to help others. And this woman saw my video, and she lives across the country. So it was great that we have the internet now to share these healing stories. And she reached out and she became a client. At the time, she was also losing her hair and had real hormonal imbalance and dysfunction with very, very heavy menstrual cycles. So that was what we started with. And we talked about my methodology, and she just was eager and ready to do what she could to change her lifestyle. And we came to find that she was eating a lot of these foods that were actually interfering with her immune system, including gluten and corn and tomatoes and dairy, all of which she was reacting to, but that she craved. So, as difficult as it is to consider doing an elimination diet and giving up your favorite foods, I told her that, look, it's only 30 days. And for me, it was the most empowering experiment that I ever did. And we'll go through this together. And so, sure enough, she did. And she removed all of those foods, including eggs and coffee and so forth. And at the end of the 30 days, she felt fantastic. And then she tried to add some of those things back in, and she just found immediately that when she added back in the tomatoes, and she loved her chips and salsa, so that was just an absolute inflammation bomb. She had a very bad outcome with that, but this was so empowering for her to actually see that what she was eating almost on a daily basis was causing so many of these problems. So over time, we actually were able to balance her hormones, get her blood sugar balanced, get her feeling great. She dropped, I want to say, nearly 25 pounds of inflammatory water weight and weight that she wanted to lose. And by the end of working with her, after a couple of months, she was feeling good enough to start doing 5Ks again. Oh, and I forgot to mention, one of her symptoms at the outset was she was falling asleep at work. And this is not a good situation. You don't want to be, I don't know if it was officially narcolepsy or I'm not even sure. I know narcolepsy is an autoimmune condition, but her fatigue was so great that she was falling asleep. And after this, her energy returned, her hair stopped falling out. She was able to get back to more regular cycles. And honestly, Ashley, it was astounding that it was mostly removing the bad things that were harming her and just adding a few supplements, like getting her vitamin D levels up, getting her magnesium balanced and up, and avoiding those favorite foods. And she was really, really amazed with how she felt.
And no longer has that
No longer
IBS.
has no longer has IBS. Doesn't associate herself with having Hashimoto's or celiac. I mean, she's really clear on what she can eat or not, and she's just decided some of these foods are just going to stay out. And she knows if she chooses, which is empowering because now we have choices, right? Now we know cause and effect, and we know if we want to add something back in, and she knows what will happen if she does, and that's that.
So just to clarify, she was diagnosed with IBS, Hashimoto's, and colitis?
Celiac
And,
disease.
and celiac. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. That is so cool. I love it. And how long from start to finish did it take for her?
I want to say 2 months of being diligent with her diet and working with me and adding back in the nutrients to really deal with some of the deficiencies like vitamin D and magnesium and vitamin B12. She was able to get back to life. And in fact, she's running 5Ks now with her daughter. So it's super empowering. And what happens is it's not just about her. This is the ripple effect of healing. When somebody is able to overcome these health challenges, they become a role model for their family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes a ripple effect in the family and then in the community. And you can just see the ripples in the pond going out. And that's super exciting.
Super exciting. I love it. You mentioned magnesium. I want to let you know that, I mean, I've been I've been on my health journey healing. I had multiple problems. You've listened to this show, so you know. But
Yes.
for listeners who've never heard, I had many health problems. I was very, very sick. And so I have spent the last 10 years finding my own health solutions. And something that I really believe in is supplements. Magnesium is the most important mineral. Everyone thinks calcium is, but magnesium is actually more important. I mean, they're all important, but magnesium,
Yes.
the body needs it so much and it's so hard to get enough magnesium, especially if someone has a gut issue, right? Because if you've been eating gluten grains and it has caused inflammation in your gut, it's very hard for your gut to absorb enough of the minerals, right? And so we have this
Mhm.
catch-22 where our gut can't absorb enough, and then there's not enough minerals in our soil anymore because of the farming practices of over 100 years, and especially the pesticides that have been used on the soil. Even if we buy organic, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that we're getting enough minerals. And so we have to take some supplements. Magnesium's very hard to take orally, either as a liquid or as a capsule, and get to full cell saturation, because if we do take a lot of it orally, the magnesium just causes the smooth muscle of the bowel to go wee, and then we're running to the toilet,
Mhm.
which is the nicest way that I could possibly say it causes diarrhea. Um, Great for people with chronic constipation, but if you have chronic constipation, you need to look into that too. And so, in my discovery of figuring out how to get to full cell saturation, because I have lots of magnesium supplements and I've enjoyed them all, but again, couldn't get to full cell saturation. And there's a $50 blood test you can get when you go to walkinlabs.com called Magnesium RBC. And it's between $40 and $60 because they always have it on sale. But in the United States, you buy that test online, and then you go to they'll tell you where the nearest lab is, and they'll draw your blood, and then they'll send you the results. So you don't even have to see a doctor to check your magnesium levels. And it wasn't until through a friend of mine I discovered this magnesium soak that within 1 month of doing it every day gets 76% of people reach full cell saturation. And we absorb about 20 grams of magnesium every soak.
Hmm.
I know, it blew me away. So I did it, and I felt, and I've had a Myers push before, which is where the naturopath will inject you with magnesium right, like straight into your vein, and you feel really drunk and kind of happy for a few minutes because it's very relaxing.
Mhm.
I felt that same feeling after my first soak, and I went, "Oh my gosh, this is real." We can't absorb magnesium readily from Epsom salt. It's just not the right molecular size to absorb into the skin. But this woman who I've had her on my show, she was like 70 something pounds in a wheelchair with 30 seizures a day, and magnesium was one of the biggest things that helped her to recover her health. And so she ended up getting the magnesium from the Zextine Sea and shipping it here, and then selling it in jugs, and you basically soak a quarter of a cup in a basin of water, and you put your feet in it, and you soak for an hour, and you absorb about 20 grams every time. And then, like I said, 76% of people get to full cell saturation within 1 month of doing it. So it's been really cool. So because you mentioned magnesium, I want to let you know, and everyone else listening, that they can use that, because if you're having problems absorbing through your gut, then absorb through your skin, and we can bypass
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, so it's
I
so
love it.
cool, right? So it's the website is livingthegoodlifenaturally.com. Yes, I know it's a really long website to type in. Livingthegoodlifenaturally.com. And then the coupon code she gave all the listeners, which gives them 10% off, is LTH, as in Learn True Health. And if you want, Palmer, I can connect you guys so you guys can chat, because I think that you would love to, as I know all holistic health practitioners would love to connect directly to her and chat and learn more about her magnesium and her healing story. So you mentioned that, and I thought, oh, I got to tell you.
Thank
My
you.
intuition just said that you would really like to know more about that. And since it's one of the cogs, right? We're just,
Absolutely.
it's not, I mean, it's so great that you cut out the grains and had such an amazing response. You were, however, for 26 years doing healthy things, so it wasn't like you walked out of a McDonald's and with with a coffee in one hand and having a cigarette in the other, and it's not like you like had this really unhealthy lifestyle and then just cut out grains and all of a sudden you didn't have MS. It's you spent 26 years building a foundation of decreasing stress and eating healthy and looking for answers. And that was the last sort of for you, that was the last thing, the last hole in the bucket that made it just exponentially heal, make your body exponentially heal. And for others, it might be correcting sleep, dealing with infections, healing the gut. It might be hormone imbalance, or toxin stress, or it might be all of them. And that's why I like that you're addressing all of them, because you're building a foundation of health by addressing all the fights together. And now I wanted to make sure that we touched on the fact that you, food being the F in fights, that you have a free gift for the listeners, because everyone goes, well, what should I eat? I know that there are some people out there with MS who no longer have MS because they're vegan, right? So it's not necessarily that eating low carb, high fat would work for everyone, because for some people it's like just eating a ton of vegetables and cutting out the meat was what their genes needed, right? So we don't know, but doing the elimination diet and figuring out for themselves what they should eat for their better health is key. And so you've come up with a free gift that teaches people what they should eat by listening to their body.
That's right.
Right. And so we're going to have the link to that in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. The link is palmerkippola.com/gift. We'll make sure the link is there in the show notes. And because I just want to make sure that listeners who are at this point are going, well, but what should I eat? Great. Go get the free gift. And it's a guide to teach you how to listen to your body so that you can dial in what is best for you. Because like I said, I know people who are vegan and reverse their MS, and it sounds like you do a bit more of a paleo diet. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. And I don't purport to know what diet is best for everybody. And that's why this optimal food guide will be, I think, a really good resource for people to find out what's best for them.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, I've sort of landed on what I'll call a paleo template diet, where I eliminate grains, dairy, and sugar. And the meats that I do eat, or the fish that I do eat, or the poultry that I do eat is either going to be 100% grass-fed. That means grass-fed and grass-finished. And the chickens and turkey are happy, free range. An important note about this: we're not just what we eat, we're whatever we eat ate. So super important to pay attention to what do those cows eat. Because when we digest and ingest that food, the profile of the meat of a cow that's been fed corn, which, by the way, cows are allergic to corn, you really want to make sure that you're ingesting something that is biologically a match for you. And so if you are going to eat meat, to opt for 100% grass-fed. I have heard, I think it was Dr. Pizzorno, say that meat is one of the most important foods, or Dr. Lee Cowden actually said this, because meats can concentrate pesticides and herbicides 3 times more, and maybe even greater than that, than any other source. So if you're eating vegetables that are conventionally grown, yes, you will get the herbicide and pesticides. But meat, it actually becomes more important to find the wild or the free range, the healthy pastured version of what you eat. And we do try to find poultry from farmers markets where the chickens are actually eating bugs and grubs, and not just, organic chicken just means that those chickens are eating organic corn and organic soy. And if you have a problem with grains or soy, you might still have issues and not know what the problem is until you remove the chicken. That was very surprising to me. So I just want to mention that to listeners, that you have to really put your detective hat on and, just be really curious about what's going on.
That's very interesting. My son was colic, and we figured out that there was like a handful of foods like broccoli and onion and garlic. I'm dairy free anyway. I'm allergic to dairy. My husband's allergic, so we just assumed our son was, and sure enough, he definitely was when we tried formula. But when I was breastfeeding, he would have horrible reactions to the foods that I ate. And it's just like what the chicken eats. If you're allergic to what the chicken eats, don't eat the chicken, right? So so I had to
Hmm.
cut out foods. I wasn't allergic to those foods, but my baby was allergic to those foods. And so I had to cut out those foods when I was breastfeeding because it was giving him really horrible pain and gas. So it just makes sense that we need to be diligent, be a food detective. I like how Dr. Mark Hyman talks about, if you're going to eat meat, make it be a condiment. So it's okay if that's $12 a pound. You're not eating a pound of it.
That's
You're
right.
making it a condiment. We don't need the giant steak. We don't need the meat to be the centerpiece of the meal. It's more of a
Hmm.
condiment and for the nutrients. Now, I myself don't eat meat right now. My
Hmm.
husband went vegan a year and a half ago, and I'm experimenting myself. I went from pescatarian to vegan. I'm just experimenting. I'm gonna see. I'm getting my blood work this week from my naturopath, so we'll see how it's going for me. But it's about experimenting and be willing to try different things and see
Yes.
how it feels. And if you have cravings, like I love that you brought up that someone who was allergic, your client was allergic to these foods but craving them. Cravings sometimes can mean that we are nutrient deficient and the body's seeking those nutrients, but it can also mean that it has that dopamine addiction to it as well.
Hmm.
Those hyper palatable foods of salt, sugar, and oil are a bit addictive. The brain lights up just like, cocaine or heroin, that we need to recognize that we do have, their bodies become addicted to these hyper palatable foods. So we need to do those deep breaths because I catch myself in food, those moments of food addiction where my body is going towards the cravings. And it's like, wait a second, is that what my body really needs? Or does my brain really want dopamine? And I have to
That's
do those
right.
deep breaths. So
That's right.
I like that you helped your client address that the cravings, especially when we're doing a food elimination, those cravings can come back with a vengeance, and we have to catch ourselves and realize that, yeah, our body might be nutrient deficient. That's why it has the cravings, but it also might be dopamine deficient. So let's go watch some like YouTube videos that make us laugh and get dopamine somewhere else.
That is great. And if I can add to that just a moment,
Mm-hmm.
because you mentioned addiction and craving. Well, the opposite of that is aversion, things that we don't like and
Mm.
don't want. And I have found that people sometimes who have an aversion to meat, they don't care for the taste or it just turns them off, are sometimes deficient in zinc. So
Oh,
that is something just to pay attention to. And you can do a zinc challenge and taste it and just do a little bit of zinc after eating so that you don't get nauseous. And that sometimes clears up that aversion to meat. So just wanted to add that.
that's fascinating. And zinc is so important for our immune health.
Hmm.
Very cool. Awesome. All right. So we've talked about the food and we've talked about infections. Let's talk a bit about gut health. How do you help people to restore their gut health? Do you recommend they eat a bunch of fermented foods and avoid grains, or is it more about listening to the body and seeing what's helping, what's not helping?
Yeah, such a good question. And I just want to step back a tiny bit because the gut is so central in the development and the healing of autoimmune conditions that we can't talk about autoimmune healing without talking about the gut. And
Mm-hmm.
it turns out that in the early 2000s, Alessio Fasano and his team at Harvard found the final element in the autoimmune equation, that is a leaky gut, or scientifically known as intestinal hyperpermeability. So that when we're eating these sad foods or taking medications in some cases, or even having stress, those factors can all cause our guts to become leaky. And that it has been proven to be the pathway or the gateway to developing autoimmune conditions. So the exciting part about having an autoimmune equation is that we can flip it to heal it, meaning if we remove the things that are causing the inflammation and the leakiness, and we heal and seal the lining of our gut, we can, as Dr. Fasano says, arrest and reverse the autoimmune condition. So this is no longer conjecture and myth or wishful thinking that we can reverse these conditions. We now understand that there is science behind this leaky gut that scientists for years poo-pooed this as not being real. Well, it is very real, and we know many things that lead to it, and we also know what we can do to restore it. So when it comes to repairing our gut, the first and foremost, we must stop putting things in that are harmful. And those would be the inflammatory elements that we've talked about. And there might be suspect foods that are, toxic to some and healthful or helpful to others. So I have no problem with eggs or nuts as an example, but for somebody else, their kryptonite might be eggs. And so that elimination diet can help you define and refine your foods, at least for maybe 6 months. Those are what you'll enjoy. You need to get rid of some for a short term while you're healing your gut. Because if you continue to eat things that are causing your gut to be permeable, so if I wanted to bring the MS back, I might, start eating gluten again and, sit down to sandwiches and pasta and so forth. And we now know that there are many medications that can create a permeable intestines. And they're actually, Ashley, I think there's a study that says that 90 medications are known to induce lupus by creating a permeable gut.
Jeez.
So it's really known information. This is not hidden information. This is out there. So whatever you can do to minimize unnecessary medications and to eliminate those sad foods and get rid of toxins in your environment. And I only recently understood that stress creates a leaky gut, like getting ready to do public speaking, for example, creates intestinal permeability. So some things are, not all stress is bad, and some of it is growth oriented. But when we are stuck in that always on stress response, that is when our guts stay open and permeable. So we need the first step in any kind of gut healing program is to make sure that we're minimizing the things that are causing harm.
Right. Yes, just like inflammation is a good thing when it's acute, but not when it's chronic and always turned on. I know that Advil or NSAIDs, I've been told, increase gut permeability and also, harm the liver. But they do increase gut permeability, so, causing leaky gut. I had a neighbor once, this is just a few years ago, 21-year-old woman who was going through chemo, not for cancer. The doctor decided to give her chemo for lupus. And that just blew me away because I even knew back then that that cutting out gluten and cleaning up diet played such a huge role in autoimmune. I've been gluten-free for 8 years with my husband. And just to see that she was suffering so horribly going through chemo for what? What that, I mean, just that MD could have looked into the research and seen what you saw, but instead he chose to give her chemo. Now, chemo is the one medication that doctors actually get a kickback from. It's like something like $2,500 or something every time, every dose. So, they get a kickback, but it infuriated me that this young woman's, potentially her entire youth has been destroyed because she's suffering greatly from chemo, which was obviously not helping the lupus. So we have to be diligent. We have to advocate for ourselves. And we always got to get a second and third opinion. Don't put the doctor on a pedestal. oh, obviously always seek a doctor. I'd never recommend that someone, especially if you have symptoms, that you avoid medical attention. It's just get more opinions and do your own research and be willing to keep seeking answers, especially when it comes to a surgery or a treatment. Like, we should really, really make sure that it is the best option for us. So food, infections, gut health, hormone balance. Now, you are a functional medicine practitioner, a health coach, in that you can get people to do blood tests. Tell us, do you do labs and blood tests? How does that work? How do you help people to balance their hormones?
So I partner with functional medicine practitioners, and that's how I can get the lab work done.
Mm-hmm.
But one reason why hormones is last in the book in terms of a core chapter, so the book is not in the same order that fights is spelled. So we start with food, and then we go to gut health, which we've just talked about. But hormones is last strategically because oftentimes when you deal with the other
Yes.
root causes, your hormones can fall back into balance. I mean,
Yes.
that really is the goal, to do whatever we can from a lifestyle perspective first. And so some of the biggest hormone imbalances that we see with autoimmune conditions are high insulin, high cortisol. So insulin, again, that's going to be when you're eating high carbohydrate foods. We also see the diabetes increase due to environmental toxins. So those are two things that you can control. And if you remove the toxins from your environment and you go lower carb, you can lower the insulin potentially. High cortisol being one. If you address stress, we can bring your cortisol into balance. Low thyroid is very common, and it's probably one of the most common hormonal imbalances we see. And that is something that can also get regulated when we do everything else for ourselves, including removing the sugar and addressing stress. High estrogen. Estrogen dominance. This is something that's both common in both men and women, and it doesn't just mean that your estrogen is high, it's relative to progesterone. So progesterone's the calming hormone. We want those hormones to be in balance. And the two other final imbalances we often see are low vitamin D and low DHEA. So in the book, because hormones is such a complicated category, I mean, each chapter could be a little book unto itself. I give people tips and strategies for how to address things naturally. And if you need additional help, how to find a practitioner who deals in bioidentical hormones, which are not the hormone replacement therapy, which are the synthetic hormones, but rather if you're going into the route of hormone therapy, you want to make sure that they're bioidentical in nature. But from my experience, I dealt with all 6 of those hormonal imbalances. So I offer a story from my own perspective on how high levels of sugar and high levels of stress created a hormonal mess for me for many, many years.
And how much did your hormones come back into balance by just shifting food and gut health?
So I wish I could tell you that they just, like a weeble that wobbles, but it doesn't fall down. And when you take your hand off it, it just goes right back to balance. That wasn't the case for me. So part of my personal story is that my hormones were so imbalanced when I was 15 years old. I had excruciating cramps and actually had to miss school on occasion because they were so bad.
Mm-hmm.
I had a gynecologist who put me on the birth control pill very, very early and told me that I could just stay on the pill until I decided to have children. Um, this is the same gynecologist who ran my blood test for a while, and why would I doubt her? She's the expert, right? For years and years, and I just did what she told me to do. And she ran my blood test and told me that my total cholesterol of 104 was excellent.
Oh.
So I, yes, this is opening a can of worms. So for me,
for those who don't know, that's way too low.
Yes.
For those that don't know, cholesterol is there's healthy cholesterol, and we need it. We want it to be high. The body needs a certain amount. The cholesterol is so important that the liver makes it. And how cholesterol medication works is it bruises the liver to the point where the liver ceases to function correctly, and so the liver can't make cholesterol. And what drives me crazy is that doctors will put people on cholesterol medication, but don't tell them to stop eating fried food, stop eating the fats that are damaged, that have oxidative damage on them, which increases unhealthy cholesterol. But they'll give you a medication that damages your liver so your liver stops producing good cholesterol, and then they don't tell you to stop eating bad cholesterol. It just drives me up the wall. There's a balance, and we need to have healthy fats. It's so important that the liver makes it. The myelin sheath on your nerves are made from fat, and MS is when the myelin sheath is destroyed, and then the nerves are inflamed. So hello, of course, you were set up for having MS if you didn't have enough healthy fats for the body, enough raw building blocks for the body to produce the myelin sheath.
That's right. That's right. That's beautifully said. And I'll throw out a little factoid here that just completely floored me. The countries with the lowest cholesterol, in other words, like my gynecologist that told me 104 was excellent, die the fastest, highest all-cause mortality, and the countries with the highest cholesterol live the longest. So that's research that's available for anybody that wants to find that. Cholesterol, it turns out, is essential for our health, and it's the foundational building blocks of our hormones, our cell membrane, and our brain health. Our brain is about 60% fat. So we need healthy cholesterol. It's all about the balance of different types of cholesterol, but that is what I'll say about this is I was a hormonal mess that I didn't just regulate back to balance by getting everything else in line, and I opted for bioidentical hormones, and now my hormones are finally in balance, and I've never felt better. So it can be done. And if I was suffering from all 6 of those hormonal imbalances, and I'm doing great now, then I know that you can heal.
Beautiful. Well, I definitely want my listeners who have autoimmune to get your book. We'll make sure the link to your book is in the show notes of today's podcast at learntohealth.com. Tell us a bit about who should read your book. Is it only people who have autoimmune, or is it people that want to generally be healthy? Tell us a bit more about your book and who it serves.
So I wrote the book with the intention to, it's the book that I would have wanted at 19 when I didn't know what to do, to my younger self, right? I wanted the step by step, but for anyone, the first audience would be people who are suffering, who are actively seeking healing and don't really know what to do next. And that would include people that are finding it difficult to afford a functional medicine or naturopathic practitioner. I really urge people, if you can, to work with somebody because they will help you shortcut your time to healing. It is so worth the investment in yourself if you can do that. But my book is actually quite popular now with integrative and functional medicine and naturopathic physicians who also want to help their clients. So they're actually buying it for their offices, which I was thrilled to see that happening. So that would be the first level, is people who are actively seeking to heal. I have clients that I've worked with who are seeking to prevent an autoimmune condition because it runs in their family. Everybody has a thyroid problem. Their father had MS, and they don't want to go down that path. So they just want to know what can they do to prevent something. And so if you put those 2 categories together, that's basically everybody, because I don't know what the actual stats are, Ashley. Maybe you know better than I do, but at least 1 in 5 people is dealing with an autoimmune condition that may be diagnosed, and many, many more people have mysterious symptoms, from joint pain and brain fog to profound fatigue to insomnia to infertility to numbness and tingling and migraines. And all of those mysterious symptoms are messages from your body that something is out of balance. So anybody that's dealing with mysterious symptoms, who has an official diagnosis or wants to prevent one, this is who this book is for.
I love it. So many people have mystery symptoms and they're seeking information. That's why they're listening today. So I hope they get your book and they apply all the lessons to helping them balance, like figure out the foods that are most important for them, and reducing the inflammation and the infections, helping their gut health, reducing toxins and stress, and then of course balancing their hormones. That'll help 100% of the population. That's definitely, everyone could benefit, and especially those who are beating autoimmune. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show today. I wonder, do you have any stories of success, or have you heard from people who have also reversed their MS using your protocol?
Absolutely. Yes. In fact, most of the people who follow me are MS warriors themselves who are actively seeking to heal from or have beat MS. And I will end with this story. One of my favorites is a client who was diagnosed with MS. Actually, the letter came to her in the mail from Kaiser Permanente, saying the results of her MRI were in, and it seemed that they were consistent with MS. She experienced the loss of vision in one eye,
Mm.
numbness on one side of her body. I mean, almost stroke-like symptoms. And she was in her mid-30s, had two young kids and a husband, and waking up one morning unable to function and to see properly, and just was absolutely terrified. So went to the neurologist and got her results, as I said, by mail. And somebody who knows us both connected us. And I was able to talk with her before her second appointment, because the neurologist was insisting that she go on injectable medication immediately. And he wanted to do a spinal tap, which I've never had done, but I can't imagine is pleasant. And I got on the phone with her and was able to transmit the certainty that I have based on all my research, my personal experience, and working with other clients, that if she was willing to work with me, give it a couple of months, try the elimination diet, work with me about reducing her stress, would she be willing to let the neurologist know, look, I know where you are, and I will schedule my follow-up appointment with you after I've tried these lifestyle interventions. If they don't work, I know where you are. And she said, yes, she was willing to wait. So I worked with her, coached her for probably 6 weeks or so, where we talked every week, and we still talk, not as often, maybe once every 6 weeks. And she found out what her trigger foods were, removed them, and her big issues, she felt, were chronic stress also. Growing up in childhood, she had a really difficult situation. Both parents either had alcoholism or drug addiction and were not able to care for her. So she grew up with her grandmother, and she had a lot of stress that was manifesting in her current life with her kids. And a lot of it she felt was driven by her past. So once she was able to feel better after removing those foods, and after about 6 weeks, she stopped having any and all MS symptoms. Nothing was noticeable anymore after she removed the foods and healed her gut. Then she was able to have the energy to deal with those profound stressors from childhood. And she started a forgiveness practice. She started doing gratitude journaling every night. And now her family, her kids, no longer ask her for sweet things. She has actually become a role model for health, and other people look up to her for information. And this is another one of those ripple effect stories. Her husband reversed symptoms of type 2 diabetes. Her children are off sugar. She is an icon for healing with food. And she's not, that's not an isolated incident. This is most people, when you take the bad stuff out, it's been one of the most profound surprises that I've experienced, is it can be way more simple than you know if you're just willing to put your detective hat on and give it a try and get some testing done. And yeah, there might be an infection to clear up. And yes, there might be mercury poisoning that you need to deal with. But the end result is this freedom. And it's just been a super good news story.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Palmer, for coming on the show today and sharing this awesome information. It definitely fills people with hope to know that, yes, they can completely reverse their autoimmune condition. They can improve their health. And for those who have mystery symptoms, following the keys in your book will help them to restore their body. I think everyone's going to get some great information from your book. I highly recommend people buy it and try it out for themselves. And if they have any questions, they can go to your website, palmerkippola.com, especially go to palmerkippola.com/gift and get the free guide. Is there anything left unsaid? Is there anything that you'd like to share to wrap up today's interview?
I would like to invite people to get still within yourself and allow your own intuition to come forth, and to maybe ask yourself the question that family friend asked me many, many years ago. Why do you think you got this blank, whatever it is? If you're dealing with something that you've got a diagnosis, or if you've got mysterious symptoms, why do you think that is? And allow time for the answer to bubble up, and really acknowledge that, because chances are pretty good you already know what's out of balance in your life. Maybe it's, you really wanted to do something different in your life and you didn't take that path. Or maybe you're in a situation where you're not happy at work, or your relationship is not working. I believe that these autoimmune conditions are really an invitation to us to wake up to who we truly are. And we may not see the gift at the moment when we're going through the middle of these awful symptoms, but I just would invite people to dig deeper and really know that you can get to the root of what's going on.
Beautiful. Excellent. Thank you so much, Palmer Kippola, for coming on the show today. It's been a pleasure to have you share this information that I know will help to transform people's lives. And so I feel honored that you are here to share this information, and I am so thrilled for the potential of how many people you've just helped. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashley. It's been an honor and a delight.
Hello, true health seeker. Have you ever thought about becoming a health coach? Do you love learning about nutrition and how we can shift our lifestyle and our diet so that we can gain optimal health and happiness and longevity? Do you love helping your friends and family to solve their health problems and to figure out what they can do to eat healthier? Are you interested in becoming someone who can grow their own business, support people in their success? Do you love helping people? You might be the perfect candidate to become a health coach. I highly recommend checking out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I just spent the last year in their health coaching certification program, and it really blew me away. It was so amazing. I learned over 100 dietary theories. I learned all about nutrition, but from a standpoint of how we can help people to shift their life and shift their lifestyle to gain true holistic health. I definitely recommend you check them out. You can Google Institute for Integrative Nutrition, or IIN, and give them a call, or you can go to learntruehealth.com/coach, and you can receive a free module of their training to check it out and see if it's something that you'd be interested in. Be sure to mention my name, Ashley James, and the Learn True Health podcast, because I made a deal with them that they will give you the best price possible. I highly recommend checking it out. It really changed my life to be in their program, and I'm such a big advocate that I wanted to spread this information. We need more health coaches. In fact, health coaching is the largest growing career right now in the health field. So many health coaches are getting in and helping people, because you can work in chiropractic offices, doctors' offices, you can work in hospitals, you can work online through Skype and help people around the world. You can become an author. You can go into the school system and help your local schools shift their programs to help children be healthier. You can go into senior centers and help them to shift their diet and lifestyle to best support them in their success and their health goals. There's so many different available options for you when you become a certified health coach. So check out IIN, check out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Mention my name, get the best deal. Give them a call and they'll give you lots of free information and help you to see if this is the right move for you. Classes are starting soon. The next round of classes are starting at the end of the month. So you're going to want to call them now and check it out. And if you know anyone in your life who would be an amazing coach, please tell them about it. Being a health coach is so rewarding and you get to help so many people. Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com and one of our fantastic true health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program.